Hi, everyone. Happy 100. This is my 100th weekly LinkedIn event. Um, Happy to welcome in the beginning Virginia and Claire, who I met between Clubhouse and LinkedIn. Just a couple of stories which kind of puts this into perspective for me. I didn't know when I actually did this that I was going to be doing this so many times.
Yeah.
First time I did it actually was just on Zoom, and I figured we'd see how it goes and give it a shot from there. And then next thing you know, I thought this wasn't so bad because I'm an introvert, as everyone knows, very afraid about stuff, and it just took on a life of its own. And what really made this past weekend so great was that on Saturday, and I don't know if you saw this, Claire, but I know Virginia did, five of us from New Jersey got together and we actually met in real life. And
Oh, I love it.
it was so great. Hi, Brenda. We
Yeah.
actually met. I was just saying, Brenda, this past weekend, right before the 100th, five of us met in New Jersey for the first time in real life in more than 2 years. And oh my God, to see Alex Freund in person, and I've seen Marty a couple of times, and then Lisa Rangel and Christine. The first thing that we, besides smiling like a bunch of kids, I got to be honest, the best thing was we were almost afraid of what to say and do. We were like, do we hug? Do we get close? And it was weird. And Christine, who I hope joins us later, actually was the one to initiate the hugs. And then we did a group hug, like from the Mary Tyler Moore show, when they're all leaving at the end.
Yeah, right.
And then, we got Alex, who Alex is, for those that you don't know, Alex is actually 77. He's going to be 78. On my birthday, we actually have the same birthday, we found out. And
All right.
he was afraid in the beginning actually to get too close to us. So thank you, Lisa. She actually got us together and got Alex there. And by the end, Alex was just as happy as everyone else. So I can't wait to see all three of you in real life. I really can't. And Virginia and I were talking first. I'm trying to plan all these different road trips. I'm seeing Rachel Simon in Atlanta. We're going down to see the Braves. I don't know if Brenda, you don't realize this yet, but I talked to Jeff Young. He's in Columbus. I'm going to Cleveland for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's going to meet me somewhere, and I'm hoping to take him to Detroit at the same time. But this has all been planned for a while. So, Claire, I will get out to the West Coast.
I know we're far away.
Kenneth, will you have a camper to go with that trip or no?
Well, that's the first thing we're deciding. Are we going to do a drive or are we going to fly?
Should be like a bus, like a tour bus.
That's what I'm thinking. A tour bus. Yeah.
Maybe I can get sponsors for it. That would be kind of cool.
There you go. There you go.
I can do job search on the way at all different places. I'm going to stop here and do job search in LinkedIn, and maybe we can all come on. But I wanted to thank, first of all, I'm going to start with Brenda because Brenda was the first person. I became a guinea pig when we did LinkedIn Live together. And Brenda, I think you'll appreciate this. Besides the shirt, I put on glasses today.
Nice.
Because I thought, we were on the call at 7:00 yesterday morning, and I thought, give you lots of credit. So here's sunglasses. Again, when I take them off.
That only works for women, Ken, because all of us, Virginia, Claire, and myself, when we go on camera, we have to have hair and makeup ready. We can't just roll out of bed, wipe water on our face.
This is a full shower day this morning.
Right. It's an effort to go through. But so yesterday I was like, I wanted to get ready, but it was just too early. And I barely had my cup of coffee in me. And I just threw the sunglasses on for that. So, but I appreciate it. Was I your first LinkedIn Live? Ken, your first guest?
Well, here's the thing. And this is where the, hi, Jack, first of all, this is where the asterisk comes in. You were my first weekly LinkedIn, my first one on StreamYard. I had done them before on Zoom. The first one I actually did was with Nancy Aronson, who was as introverted as me. And we just decided to test having a conversation, the two of us on Zoom. And it was like we were both waiting for the other to talk. Weren't sure what to do. And by the end, we invited a couple of other people, and it was just fun. And so, Jack, I want to welcome my fellow New Jersey.
Yes. Well, you know what? Listen, I got a bone to pick. I saw you with Lisa Rangel and a bunch of other folks in Montclair, and I live, I don't know, about half an hour away.
It was in actually it was in Maplewood.
Maplewood, even closer.
I know.
Where was my invite? I felt left out.
But we're doing this every month. First
Okay.
of all, this was planned for a while, and as I was saying before, Alex and I have the same birthday on May 27th, and Lisa Rangel's birthday is a week before ours. So May is going to be a birthday thing, and then in June I think we're going to head down the shore. But I can't wait for us all to get together again. I'd be curious from each of you, what are some of the things that you've kind of found over the last couple of years in terms of LinkedIn and just, getting together? I mean, I love this for myself. I'd be curious to know from each of you what some of the things have been for you.
For me, I'm sorry.
Anyone.
Oh.
I mean, how have you? What? You're muted,
You're on
Brenda.
mute, Brenda.
You're muted.
While she's doing that, can I say something what you guys were talking about before?
Yeah.
Guys have to get ready too. If you think we don't,
Please.
we're vain. We're very vain. So
Okay.
What do you have to do, Jack?
Yeah.
Maybe screw your back and then
well,
that's it.
I'm looking at him. I'm all white. I got to do something about my beard now. I got to, do I dye it? Do I just shave it? So, yeah. I mean, there are things.
Yeah.
No.
Do I wear a black T-shirt or a white T-shirt?
That's
Right,
an
yeah.
epic struggle, Jack.
It's hard. It's real.
That sounds like a tough process, Jack. We're here for you.
It's real.
Right, we're a support group. So Kenneth, what I was saying to you is when you're doing like a live stream, either in a StreamYard or in a Zoom room, unless people know each other very well, I find it's better to say, hey, I want to know what all of you think. Let's go around the room and then think about like you're holding the baton as the host of the meeting, and you need to turn the baton over to someone, because otherwise if you throw the baton out to the group, two things are going to happen. One, the baton's going to hit the floor, which is what just happened. None of us grabbed it. Or you're going to have four of us grabbing it, and then we all clunk heads in the middle. And then we're all like, oh, I'm sorry, Claire, Virginia, you go. No, Jack, you go. So I think it's better if you you call on us.
Sure.
I don't know if everyone else feels the same way or.
Sure. I mean, it was the whole thing like, mic on, mic off, or you can mute yourself now and all that stuff. So let me start with you, Virginia, because you're next to me. And I'll say this about you, Claire and Brendan, Jack. I've been in all of you guys for a while, and it took, for me, I really wanted to get to know you. But Virginia, what have been some of the changes for you in terms of how you've been using LinkedIn and, between the pandemic and even networking?
I don't even remember life before the pandemic. Let me think about this. I guess what the last couple of years have forced me to do is get more comfortable in front of the camera. I used to, I used LinkedIn years before the pandemic, but I would jump on phone calls, or if someone lived nearby, I would meet them for coffee. I don't know if you guys know Kristen Sherry, but we had been friends on LinkedIn forever, and turned out we lived like 2 miles from each other. So, but this forced me to do, real networking calls on Zoom and just get comfortable with that format. So I think that's probably the biggest change for me. And I'm sure, a lot of people.
What about you, Claire?
Yeah, I think I missed people like everybody else, but that kind of pushed me sort of in the same direction as Virginia, as to, how can we start connecting with people when we can't be together? Because, believe it or not, even though resume writing and interview coaching is so very virtual, it's a lot of on the phone, it's a lot of Zoom calls. Before I did meet with a fair amount of my clients in person, we meet at a coffee shop or whatever. So I'm on the same boat as Virginia. I think it got me more comfortable in front of the camera, and then enjoying it too, and seeing how, like in every phase, we could be more creative to get what we need done. Yeah.
How about for you, Brenda? Like when you're working with job seekers also, do you find that there were different challenges working with job seekers through whether it's video interviewing or kind of representing themselves? Because you've had a business, I think, probably pre-pandemic.
My son's going to the gym. I'm in the Florida room today because I got sick of being in my home office, and my dog wants to be outside. So I've got it's like all these things are happening around me right now. And I tried to listen very intently to the question, but I was worried about my son walking out the door, and I wanted to make sure the gate's locked behind him. Is the gate locked behind you? Okay. And I don't want the dog to run out.
I love this.
You asked a question about job seekers. Sorry.
This is what's great about this, just doing this stuff in real time. I mean, I actually had to text someone to say I'm going to be on a call from 1 to 3. Don't ring the doorbell. don't call my phone because that's happening before. And actually,
Yeah.
I did these from 1 to 2 because this is when the landscapers weren't going to come until they came to 1.
That's why I have these the AirPod Pro now, because it blocks out everything.
Yeah.
So Brenda, I was
Yeah.
going to ask in terms of job search strategies and when you do your job search thing on Fridays, have you
Yes.
noticed any changes even from the beginning to now when you're working with job seekers?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, when I first started doing both I was doing like LinkedIn for job seekers webinars, and then I started doing a Friday VIP job seeker office hours call. In the beginning, it was kind of like I feel like the group, we were all devastated together. Like we were dealing with the pandemic, that in and of itself, we were all freaked out, like thinking if I touch something, am I going to die? Like we didn't know what we know now. So we were all kind of freaked out about that. And then on top of that, good people were losing their jobs and they felt like they were completely alone in it. Now I feel like enough time has passed and there's so many great resources and group and good people out there that want to help each other. And you're hearing people going back to work and helping, pull other people, back to work as well, sharing job postings and things like that. So I think in the beginning, the job seeker, it was felt like very individualistic. This is happening to me. And now I think the job seekers are more like, okay, it happened to me. Oh, but it happened to you and it happened to you and it happened to you. Like, oh, and there's resources out there. So I feel like it's more community now than at least back in probably 2020, if that makes sense.
It probably does. I think what I have found is there's a lot of more empathy out there now when people are posting, when people are commenting. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Now, Jack, from a recruiter standpoint, when this first happened, I mean, do you find that the relationships with recruiters and job seekers have changed? It's more empathy. Do you find it's more challenging? Because we hear about jobs all the time and jobs are coming back. I'd be curious to get a sense of what you're finding.
It's a bizarre market because it's so hot that what ends up happening, you have expectations for job seekers that are really super high because you hear, wow, it's so hot. So then they feel, hey, I should ask for a whole lot. And then on the other side of the equation, with hiring managers, you would think that they would, say, hey, all right, we have to do what we have to do, but not so much. So it's interesting. It depends on like what sector you're in. Some the companies will really pay out what they have to do. Others, it's like they don't get it. They don't understand that it's shifted. And you would think they would because this has been going on for a while now, that it's been so hot, record-breaking, employment rates. So it's a weird vibe. It's not like you would expect. You would really expect, companies to bend over backwards and do whatever it takes to bring people aboard and pay them whatever it takes and offer them, the benefits they want. There's a lot of lip service to it, but not necessarily do they deliver. Now, I'm completely generalizing because it really depends upon the person. It depends on the company. It depends on the job, how hot it is. But it's just the frustration thing for me. It's kind of much more nuanced than when you read reports, in the news about how it is, because they make it just very black and white. But if you're kind of in the tech space and you're a software engineer, boy, you're in demand. You could call it, you can name your price. But in others, not so much.
So
yeah.
So before I get to you, Claire, I just have a question from Alex, and I know Brenda, I think you said you had to leave before the others, so I'm going to show the question. And Alex wanted to hear from each of you on a short answer. Why do your clients need you?
Good question.
Brenda, go ahead, Brenda.
Why do my clients need me? I work with a range of individuals. I specialize in working with executives, which I will say many of them are experience rich, or they have many, many years of work experience and industry experience, but they are either social media apprehensive or social media averse, and they don't know if they're doing LinkedIn the right way. They haven't built out their profile, but they know there's a huge opportunity. So why do people need me? Because I will help to guide them through the process, and there's no bad questions. It's so funny how common the questions and the concerns are that I get from executives. So I help to guide them through the process, and I do so confidentially. I don't disclose who I'm working with, and I make the process easy for them. So
Great.
Hopefully that answers that question.
Right on. And Virginia, what about you? I mean, Alex does this all the time when we go to networking events. He asks a question because he wants people to answer, because it's a way for him to kind of understand, because that's what he does. So Virginia, what about you?
Well, no, Alex, I love that question, and I'm so happy you got to get out and see people again. I know it was long overdue. So I write resumes, LinkedIn profiles, career marketing collateral for people. And what's been interesting is whether it was, 2020, when what you were saying, where everyone seemed like they were at risk for losing their job and panicked, to now where if people are saying, let me just test out the waters, the commonality is that it's really competitive, whether because there weren't enough jobs or there's too many people. And so people need me because they want to stand out, and it can be really hard to stand out when it comes to telling your own story, especially when it's complex and convoluted, and there's a lot of it to fit into a couple pages.
Great. How about you, Claire? First of all, Claire, Virginia, and I used to do Lions and Tigers and Resumes, oh my, which was an ode to like the Wizard of Oz. So we talked about this in a lot more detail, but I'd love to know, Claire, what your sense is as well, because we will do that again, I'm sure. But for now, this is, what makes you different, or why would someone want to reach out to you for what you do?
Yeah, well, first, I am so excited for the reunion of Lions, Tigers, and Resumes. Oh my, that was so funny. What a great room. But I love that question because for me, I think that when it comes to folks in medical sales, which is who I primarily work with, medical sales leaders and executives and up. And the mission of a resume and of all the things pertaining to getting your next medical sales job haven't changed for many years. They've evolved a little bit, but essentially it's still the same cornerstones of personal and professional marketing. So how I always talk about it is, the next step really is to find your specialist, right? If you're an executive, you're going to go to Virginia because she's incredible, right? If you want to go paint your house and you don't know what color to choose, you should run over to Benjamin Moore today and have somebody help you with color theory, So I think it's becoming more important than ever to find specialists who really know the industry well. That way they can guide you on so many different levels of the job seeking front. So, hey, Linda.
So we're going
Hello. Hi, everyone.
And I'm going to introduce Linda, and I will get to questions, I promise. I just want to, first of all, Jack, if you can answer. Alex actually said, what did people, and you're a recruiter, so you have a different client. If
right.
The client might be the company, and it might also be working with the job seeker. So how did you get started doing recruiting? What do you find good about it, or what is it that makes it such an interesting opportunity to do that?
So basically, I went into it because I failed at everything else, and I didn't know what else to do. And that's what most recruiters, if they're honest, will tell you. They fall into it because there's not a whole lot of barriers to entry. You don't need a certain degree, you don't need a certain accreditation, what have you. So you could just say, "Hey, I'm a recruiter." No kidding. And you could just start. So yeah. So and that's just and it turns out, and it turns out that really, if you have, I'll boil it down. This is so interesting. Like if you have a decent personality and you could kind of work well, maybe a little schmooze ability, and you're honest and you have integrity, and you could be a matchmaker where you could introduce people together. That's really what it takes. It's a pretty simple business model. And for someone like me, and where I say, wait, I could be in a nice, comfy office. I could just talk with people all day long and make a lot of money. That sounds pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. So yeah, so it's a bizarre, it's like a bizarre world. But that's a good point. But there's a lot of bad points too. It's a really cutthroat business. It's really tough. If it's one of those things, you eat where you kill, so that if you could spend a whole lot of time working with somebody and working on a job, and if you don't place the person, then all that time is for nothing. So it's one of those things too, where you have to have kind of this really tough, thick skin, because otherwise it could drive you crazy. between the highs and the lows. So you have to kind of keep that middle ground. And I would not advise people to do this line of work. It's not for the faint of heart. It's pretty brutal.
So before I introduce Linda, I have a question, Jack.
Yeah.
Is this virtual wallpaper? Or is this actually in your home?
This is actual my wallpaper, man. It's cool, right? I can't take credit.
It's a tapestry.
It was my wife and my daughter who did this, and you got to see downstairs in the dining room. It's even it's more extra than this. Yeah.
So welcome, Linda Trignano is another of my wonderful networking friends from New Jersey, and we joke about this story all the time.
What is this everyone from New Jersey? This is like, how is
Not
that?
me.
Right. Oh, well, yeah.
Linda, how are you doing? Is it your knee that you had the surgery?
No, I had extensive foot surgery on my right foot. So that's why I'm a little further away, because I have my foot up. It's only been 2 weeks since I had the surgery. So it's a 6-week recovery. So I had all the bones realigned in my foot. So it's pretty extensive. So
Linda and I, we did, and I talk about this all the time, we did a networking, a LinkedIn event during the storm, and we both lost power. Linda was my speaker, and the event went on by itself with Joey Hempelfarb. So I've been, that was just one of those things. And Linda, I don't know if you've ever met Claire or Virginia or not, but you might want to talk a little bit about your background and the things that you do, because we know you in Jersey, but not as much as everyone else.
So my background, and I do know Jack a little bit, and Virginia's been a speaker of mine at one of my job search groups. But my background is I am out of AT&T, as many people in New Jersey were in the past. And I was first in sales. I sold network services for them, and I moved into HR, into recruiting. And some of what Jack said is true, some is not, from my perspective. But then again, I was a corporate recruiter, right? And I had a team of recruiters, so all of that work didn't just fall onto me directly. But from that, I moved over to business development, and then part of a downsizing. And I now combine all of that work together. And I work with job seekers. I help them. Really, my sweet spot is acing the interview. That's the part that I enjoy, and that's the part I'm most helpful with for anyone I'm working with. And the other part is I do trauma and grief in the workplace. So I really help managers understand how to talk to individuals that are going through difficulty. And no better example than the COVID, and teaching managers how to really speak with compassion and empathy. So that's me in a nutshell.
I want to call out to some great people on the call. Bob McIntosh, my fellow Red Sox Nation fan up in Boston. I know that Jack, you
nice Yankees comment.
Good plug.
Like the Yankees. I noticed up here Christine Dykman, who was here with us when we were at the diner, and we will do that again.
That I wasn't invited to, yeah.
Oh, well, there's always a next time. There's always a next time. And then up here, I noticed that Sarah Clays was here from England, so that's great. And Tegan Bartos, and of course, Hannah Morgan. And Hannah and I are actually going to be testing next week a LinkedIn audio event. Wish us luck. And if that goes well, there'll be more to come for sure. But I think one of the things that I have always found about everyone here, everyone is really nice and helpful. And I think the 2 words I've learned when people ask a question is it depends, like Marty Lattman says, because there is no one right or wrong answer. And sometimes people really want a specific answer. So, Linda, you bring up about the challenges that people have now with grief in the workplace. It's hard sometimes when you go there. And empathy, I think, is so important. So Virginia, you do resumes. How do you feel? I mean, with LinkedIn, with the career gap now, they have that career gap that you can put there. Do you like that? Do you think, how do you actually want to reflect a gap on a resume, based on your experience?
So the answer to me is it depends. Sorry. I really appreciate that they have put that in. I think I'm going to use it on a case-by-case basis. I know that it is not keyword searchable. So if there would be another way to sort of approach the gap, I might. A solution that I have used that, that where I don't use the stay-at-home mom or caretaking option is to list the company as present, but then put the end date in the job title. If I'm trying to enhance the searchability, if I have some additional information that I can share about the gap, what you've done, how you've kept your skills up, if you've used your talents for free for people, I'll do that. But I do feel like there's been more grace this time around than what I saw in 2008 with the recession. I felt like that there was grace, but more in certain industries, certainly financial services. So I feel like if you're going to have a gap, this is the best time ever to have one.
So, Jack, you're a recruiter, obviously. How do you view a gap, or how do you view if you get a resume from someone and they don't have a current job or they have gaps, is that a turnoff for you to try to?
Not for me, Ken, but it's from the companies, which is so unfortunate, and it just feels at times that rather than looking for reasons to hire somebody, they're looking for reasons to say, thanks, we're going to keep looking. And when you have a gap on it, and it happens. I've recruiting for it's going to go on 25 years. I don't know one person who's been in the job market for, let's say, 5-10 years who hasn't had something happen. You let go, you're fired, you quit on your own, something, whatever. It happens. And it's so commonplace. But then when you interview, they act like, what? What were you doing for, 2 or 3 months? Where's that get? How dare you not be working for that time? And it's unconscionable at times where, they look at that as if there's something wrong with you, like you did something bad. And it's one of those many things that I've noticed where, these companies are mired in these old school ways of thinking, and they can't realign their thoughts to say, wait a minute, so what? Someone has a gap. This is life. Things happen. And let's look at a person in their entirety and what they've done and what they've contributed, and not get hyper focused in, okay, you didn't work for 6 months or a year. And it's rough. It's rough because then also what ends up happening too is that if you do have this gap and you go for an interview and you could feel from the interviewer that they're starting to pick away at it, then, if you're still, let's say, you're still not working, then you're feeling a little self-conscious. I'm not working. Your self-esteem is eroded. Your self-confidence is eroded. So then it's hard to do well. And you know this better than I do, everyone here, is that then if you don't have that confidence, you're not going to be your best self in the interview, and it probably won't go well. And then you don't get that job offer, or you don't get moved on, then you feel even worse. So it's like put salt in the wounds for people when they do that.
So let me ask you this, Jack. I mean, and you and I have had this discussion so many times. Hiring managers, for the most part, they hide behind all these different reasons not to hire someone. For whatever the reason is, it's almost as though they've never had a work gap, or it's almost as though maybe they're afraid to make a change. So like what Dominic says, and Dominic, is what does it take to change that perspective with companies? What is it going to take for companies to get past this? It has to be chronicled every single month and year, or will it not change? Anyone?
I don't think it has as much. Sorry, I hope you don't mind me jumping in.
No.
And I don't. For me, I'm not a fan of the career gap through LinkedIn, and the reason is I feel like it highlights the wrong thing, and instead, life happens in our career. I was laid off 4 times in a row, but I didn't go into interviews immediately sharing, hey, I've been laid off a bunch of times. That shouldn't be the focus. And I think Jack's hit it on the head with, it comes down to the confidence you carry. And part of the layoff journey, part of changing industries, part of, in my world, getting into medical sales from an associate in marketing long ago, it wasn't, it was keeping the focus on, I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of given the chance.
And I feel that while I think people feel nervous to have that gap year, that gap in the timeline, the focus really should be on networking intentionally. It really should be on building relationships. It really should be on, like Virginia said, the hardest thing, telling your story. And then once we focus there, and probably very much like Linda teaches, a lot of the interview is bringing that confidence foot forward. Once the focus is there, forget about the gap, and you go after companies you're passionate about, that you feel aligned with, that you feel like you can really make a difference. And then if they say no for whatever reason, whether it's in their control, they're hiding behind something, standards or hiring practices, old, outdated hiring up, practices, outdated things, whatever it is, as long as you're standing in your confidence and you're going forward because you do believe in what you're doing, I think that's where the focus needs to be. So, and do we all have a career gap from time to time? Sure, absolutely. And I would argue that a lot of times those make us who we are as people too. So I'm not a fan of highlighting it in the LinkedIn profile. I don't think, for me, I don't love having it as its own line item. And instead, I just encourage folks to focus on what you do bring to the table and what you can, instead of how do I cover up, my feeling of not enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to do from now, because I see a bunch of questions come in, if you each want to raise your hand or just take turns doing that, it might be better, because I think any of you could do that. So Victoria Hepburn, do you see hiring managers shifting their views on career changers in the industries experiencing talent wars, like tech and financial services?
Let me just say, let me just say that I do think that there is some shifting happening. It takes a long time to make a change, but I think that companies are beginning to realize that they need to open up and take a look at the whole person. I too am not a fan of highlighting a gap. What I like to do is to have everybody really verbally ready through practice, etc., so that when a manager does question you, you can answer in that state of confidence. And then they get the opportunity to not only view you differently, but to also change their perspective about how people who have been out of work look. So I do think it's changing, and I do think it's really, the impetus has really been the number of people that are willing to leave jobs where they're not happy and looking for new jobs. Big push for managers to now hire, interview, bring on people in a very different manner.
Great. Virginia?
Everyone I know that has made a career change before and after, during and after the pandemic, did it primarily by bypassing applying online as that first point of entry, and sometimes bypassing recruiters, because Jack, and I would be curious to see what Jack thinks, but I remember you telling me, Jack, in an interview, recruiters are paid to match. They are accountable to the hiring manager who's looking for an exact match. And so a career changer probably isn't as close a match as someone else. But when you bypass those two bodies and work to get internal champions and referrals from people that have heard your story, or you build a case to convince them to take a risk by showing that your skills are transferable, that your achievements are transferable, that is the best way to overcome the hiring bias, the career gap bias, and then all the isms that people are dealing with, ageism, all of that. You tell your story, you tell it confidently, and you sort of eliminate that chip on your shoulder coming into it, because that stuff is beyond what happened is beyond your control, but how you present yourself and who you tell your story to is within your control.
I'm glad you brought that up, Virginia, because it is different. You're right. So that for somebody who's watching this now, if you're going through a recruiter, it's going to be a different experience, because a recruiter is paid to find, as Virginia was saying, that perfect fit, because they're not going to pay a recruiter, a 20, 25, 30%, percentage off of the person's salary unless you can kind of deliver, hey, this is perfect. so that you'll get some pushback. So if I would send somebody who has maybe 3 out of the 10 ingredients, even though they're smart and amazing and wonderful, they'll be like, can you keep looking for some more? But as Virginia, as you pointed out, if you can go network and go in other routes, then you might be able to get, to get that job and pivot from, I think the question was like whether from technology to finance or finance to technology or what have you. You have a better shot.
So one thing that came up, and it actually started with the idea of COVID, people actually asking, do I put my COVID vaccination status on my resume or on my LinkedIn? And it goes along with the question that Cassandra brought up. Is it someone's business why there's a gap? Do you want to go into detail, or how open should someone be? I mean, if you were out because you were taking care of someone during COVID, or if it's something else, at what point does it stop? I know the company wants to hire the right person, and all that, but someone who had to take a couple months off or whatever time may be just as relevant. But how does the job seeker portray themselves? Go ahead, Claire.
I love it. I love this question. Thank you for asking it. Who asked this question? This is
that
a
question.
Great
I'm actually going to put it up here. That was Cassandra Shelley. I actually took a couple of things in there. She said there are conversations about it not being an employer's business why there's a gap.
Yeah.
So that happens all the time. So again, this may be in it depends, or maybe something else. Oops.
I think. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. My bad.
No, that's okay. I was like, okay, speed round, go.
No.
Quick, 5 seconds, Claire, hurry it along. So I love that question so much, and I think it's because it's reflective of my journey through my career too. Because no joke on the 4 layoffs, and the thing is, again, do we go in immediately talking about it? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on how you tell your story and your career story. So, for example, if you took the initiative because either you had to, or for your own personal reasons you had to take time out of work, step away from your earning potential to take care of a family member, I mean, the story that weaves about you as a person is incredible. So I think for me, whatever your story is, for whoever is listening here, own your story. So all of the rough parts that are relatable to the story you tell them. You don't have to be an open book and talk about how many cavities you have necessarily, but definitely if they ask, if a company, right? Like, well, if a company asks about a gap on your resume, if a company asks about what have you been doing since the pandemic, walk me through why this year of sales, this quarter of sales in 2020 was terrible. Tell the truth, but tell your story and own it. Because the thing is, we are all part of our own experience, right? We all have our own complex stories to tell. And I really encourage you to own your story, because whether it was a layoff, whether it was getting fired, whether it was, you were selling real estate in 2008, like whatever it was, you learned something and came out on the other side of that with some key learnings. And so I think a lot, bye Virginia. And I think a lot of
Virginia, we're getting in Christine Dykman, another hugger from Saturday.
So I just say own it. Take what you can from your story and make it part of you, because it already is. It already is part of your story. And if you can tell it in a way that supports your growth from that experience, the key learnings from that experience, and now what you're prepared to do in light of those things, then you will come to that conversation in confidence, because you believe in yourself, and you should, because we all go through hard stuff, but that's what makes us who we are.
So just for those that don't know Christine works out of the Monmouth County workforce development job search area group down the shore, as we say. And, Linda, I'll get to you in a second. I just wanted to get Christine's thought. We were talking about how you handle a job gap, whether it's on an interview or a resume. Do you bring attention to it? Is it anyone's business about the details? And I know you can speak to that because you probably have a lot of clients there that have similar challenges.
They do. And can I just say ditto? Everything Claire said. I would have said everything that you said, Claire. Own it and tell your story, and it is what it is. You can't hide it, and you shouldn't hide it. It's part of you, and it makes up who you are. Definitely don't highlight it. I don't care for the whole LinkedIn thing either, and the career gap. But some people like it, some people don't. You gotta. It depends. Do what's right for you. But you wouldn't put it on your resume, and you wouldn't talk about it in an interview walking in. So I agree with everything you just said.
So what about you, Linda? I mean, do you, when you work with those in transition, what are the things that you suggest in terms of telling their story and owning the job gap?
Well, I could also say ditto to Claire and Christine. However, I want to emphasize just a little bit more this need for not only owning your story, but really getting down some of the things that you spoke about, Claire, this aspect of how does this enhance me as a person who might be on your team? And I think that frequently I find that job seekers, they say, well, it enhanced my leadership or my responsibility, my ownership of things, my ability to take charge. But that doesn't necessarily transfer over to the hiring manager. So unless you're clearly stating that and highlighting that in the interview for the interviewer, that might get lost in translation. So I want to just emphasize that part of all that Claire said, because it's very important. Don't make the assumption that they'll get how good it was that you moved your skill set forward during your timeout.
So one of the questions I get all the time, and this may be, and it depends, one is someone applies for a job. How long after or how often do you think a job seeker should follow up? Or should it be in the interview where they reach out to the recruiter or hiring manager and say, what is your time frame for doing that? I mean, Jack, you're a recruiter, so you can have a little different viewpoint. But what would you say?
I'd say it's fair for somebody to kind of follow up and say, hey, Jack, what's going on? What's happening? Where am I? Am I going, did they pick up on me? Or let's say they already had an interview. Do they want me to come back and have a second interview? So I think it's well within their rights to advocate for themselves and to kind of push a little bit to make sure. Sometimes what happens for people who are watching this, if you deal with a recruiter, oftentimes they don't tell you what's happening. So you're in the dark, which is tough, because then it's hard to give an answer. So let's say, they're not telling, let's say, Ken, you're the hiring manager and you're not getting back to me, and I have to tell Christine about, what's going on. I don't know what to say. So what I do is I'll level with people, say, you know what, they're not getting back to me. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm trying to get a hold, but it's not unusual when this happens, because this is kind of the environment we're in now, where people feel very free to ghost and not give feedback. So you can't immediately say, because you didn't hear, that they're not interested. But then there comes a point in time where you start feeling, all right, I sent an email, I followed up, I called, I left a message, I sent a text, I'm not hearing. And then it's like, okay, I think I got the message. You're just kind of blowing me off, and I got to write this off and move on to something else.
What about you, Claire?
Jack, I know that it does depend. Sorry, guys, it really does depend. Jack, I like what you shared there. At some point you have to walk away and just clap your hands off and say, okay, they'll get back to me after 2 weeks, and if they don't, I'm already on to my next adventure, right? I'm already networking for the next thing. But we're not always privy to what's going on the other end of the phone, the computer, and the screen. So I resonate with what you say about that. And I think for me, while I would love to say that the majority of people that I work with do that follow up and do it immediately and then wait, a lot of times what happens is they didn't send the first follow up. And then they kind of, put their hands up and say, oh, when are they going to get back to me? I'm not sure. So I think it's just a reminder to follow up that I just want to encourage everyone. It's so very important, and being specific in your follow up and kind in your follow up is always so important. You know, that thank you note with that personal touch is a winner. And then, you know, give it a week. Give it a week, follow up, offer some value when you do. Hey, I met this gentleman who's really interesting. I think you two would get along great. Just wanted to introduce you. Read this article, reminded me of our conversation. Things like that can be helpful, and they can also feel less like a pesky check-in versus checking in too much. Am I being annoying or something like that? And then, like Jack said, you know, if you don't hear back after a while, you just carry on with your mission. You keep looking, you keep moving forward in other areas, and you wait, and you kind of try not to worry about it. Yeah, that's my thought.
Right. So Linda and Christine, a question for you.
I agree with Jack in the sense that you should always be honest, because for both sides, it's just easier for people to digest than to kind of sugarcoat or give them a runaround or ghost people. Just be honest, and it's not really costing you anything, except maybe a little bit of vulnerability, and that's a good thing on both sides. Again, it shows your compassion for the opposite party. Claire, I agree with what she had said. Definitely follow up with thank you, whether it's email, and then I always recommend thank you email. It's immediate, but then also send it postal mail, because the postman takes 4 or 5 days to get it to the person you're sending it to. And one of the purposes of a thank you is to keep you on the front of their mind. And that's another way to make contact or reach out, another touch point. And then if you should be asking in the interview, what is your timeline? Am I the first you're interviewing, or am I the second or third? Or when do you plan to make a decision? So you know better when to follow up, because if you are letting somebody else control your destiny, then you really are going to be climbing the walls wondering, well, I don't know whether I follow up or whatever. This gives you a little bit more concreteness to the entire process. In addition, until you walk through the threshold of a door, you don't have a job. So you're still networking, you're still relationship building, you're still applying and interviewing and whatever. I don't mean to ghost, but at the same time, don't put all your eggs in one basket and then they take that wreck off the table and say, oh, we decided not to hire, and you never started. So then you're kind of in limbo again. You got to restart everything. So you're always moving forward, because you just never know what's going to happen with life.
So Linda, what about you? Is there a certain time frame that you recommend people follow up, or how they follow up? Because I know texting is now a new thing, and sometimes I've heard from recruiters that sometimes they don't mind a text because they can't get the emails on the phone so much. So what do you think about that?
I always advise asking in the interview, when can I follow up? What's the best method? You know, what is good for you? How often? You know, ask those questions. I like to make sure everyone understands an interview is a two-way street, and you have the right to be entitled to get information as much as give information. That's really what I say. So rather than repeat what everyone has said about, let me just add one other little piece in here. And I find that job seekers oftentimes will tell me, I applied for this job, I'm a perfect match, why haven't they gotten back to me? That I followed up, I haven't heard back. And what I say, in kind of in relation to what Claire and Jack have both said before, that, you know, your follow-up, you should do the follow-up, but I'm an advocate, not even as much as other people, of you have an interview, you do the follow-up, and you never consider that that's your job, even if you think you're a perfect match. I've been recruiting for many years, and I know that if you think you're a perfect match and I don't think you're a perfect match, then you're not going to be a match. So don't put your hopes on one job. Interview, follow up, but keep looking without stopping or holding tight to that's your job until you hear it's not or it is.
So, Linda, I'm going to give you a chance to answer the next question first, since you're always at the end. The question came up, does anyone read cover letters? Whether you're applying on, so what's the answer that you would give?
And I see that conversation so much in LinkedIn these days and in online articles. To me, it's a debate that's been going on since time began, practically. I think that my personal preference when I was actively recruiting, I read cover letters. And I still hold to the fact that a job applicant should write a cover letter. It gives you an opportunity to be really unique. As a recruiter, you're looking at, 100 different resumes. What makes yours stand out? The one advantage is a cover letter. Do they read it? You have no way of knowing that. But if they do, you have just given yourself a big boost in getting personal or more personal with the interviewer that can only help you if it's well written, if there's no typovers, get yourself, I'm a big fan of Grammarly, get yourself somebody to read it over and don't send it out of poor quality. It just can help enhance your chances of being noticed in a busy, busy world.
So let me ask you this question, Claire, or Jack. What are some of the questions that you want to hear from a job seeker, like when that you want when someone's going for an interview? What types of questions, when they ask do you have any other questions? What are the things that they should be prepared to ask about, instead of like saying, no, I don't have any other questions, thanks anyway?
Well, first, I love when the focus is on questions in an interview, because Linda, my heart is singing to hear you say that it's a two-way street. It is. And I think that it's a high stakes conversation, of course, like a negotiation. It's a selling based conversation, a marketing based conversation, but it's a two-way street because it's as much about finding out if you are a good fit for them as if they are a good fit for you. And why that's important is when you get in that job, if you've done a brilliant job at selling yourself into the job, but you get there and you hate it, you probably should have asked better questions. So questions for me are absolutely pivotal in the interview. It should be where you spend probably 70% of your time preparing and researching the role. And by researching the role and the people you're going to speak with, if you can, that'll sort of naturally help guide what those questions should be as well, because you'll want to focus on what kinds of things are important to the company. What is this hiring team trying to achieve by bringing you on board? And where is this company going in the next year that you're going to be a part of getting it there? So that's sort of the core for me for developing those kinds of questions. Because yes, while you can kind of go with the traditional route of, oh, is there anything that you'd like to know about me that we haven't talked about already? Or, what's an ideal candidate look like for this role? Or tell me about someone who didn't succeed in this role. What was that like? Can you describe your team's culture? All of those things are great. But for me, the very best questioning comes from a targeted approach, because you've done your research on the company and who you're going to speak with. What do you think, Jack?
See, I love when people ask questions, and I want them to ask organic, genuine questions, not I have to ask a question, but because by asking questions, it shows they're engaged, it shows they're interested. So if I speak to somebody and there's not a lot of questions or no questions at all, that doesn't bode well, because it doesn't show that they're interested. Because with anything, you want to go out to eat. Okay, where do you want to go? Oh, I like this food. Do you have this food? You want to have that back and forth so that you can kind of vibe off of it. And the more questions, to me also, is telling. So if you have a candidate who's asking a lot of questions, that's a buy sign. That's showing that they're really interested. They want to know more about it. They want to learn more about it. They're really intrigued. They're interested. If you have somebody who doesn't ask a lot of questions, that doesn't always mean this way, because they could be introverted, they could be quiet, they could be, uncomfortable. But if they don't ask a lot of questions, as a recruiter, sometimes I feel they're not terribly interested in it. They're not interested enough to ask these questions. And then if they don't, I'll kind of go back to what I think Claire, you and Christine were saying about just being very forthright, is that I might ask and say, hey, Linda, you haven't asked a lot of questions. I mean, are you interested in this role? Does this seem, something you want to do, or is this not for you? And I feel comfortable saying that, because if it's not for you, I don't want them to feel awkward and kind of be in this conversation where they really don't want it, but they don't want to hurt my feelings. So this way I'm letting them know, no, that's fine. If you are not interested and this doesn't resonate with you and you don't feel that this is the right path, that's okay. That's fine. Then we'll try to find something else for you. So yeah, I think that's a really big thing. And just to really be quick on the cover letter, what I find the cover letter is most helpful if there's something that really doesn't fit on a resume, but you want to let the person know. So let's say in this now, I'll say kind of post-pandemic world, if let's say you relocated to another area, and now maybe you're not in New York City any longer, maybe you want to put in the cover letter, hey, I relocated since then, to make sure that it's okay. You want to make sure that the company knows what's going on, so you don't have that awkwardness. You come in to interview, we love you, then they find out that you're in a different location and like, oh, it's not going to work. So if there's certain things that doesn't fit neatly in the resume, but you want to convey it, or if you really just want to work remote, or there's something very specific you want to do, or you're relocating to another state and you want a job in that state, then you want to put it out. So then the person who's reading it go, oh, okay, Jack moved to Austin, and even though his address is New Jersey, oh, okay, I understand why he's going for this job. He's moving to Austin, and okay, that makes sense. So you kind of connect the dots.
So
Jack,
Christina,
I have a request of you.
Yeah.
Can you, instead of being a recruiter, teach recruiters how to recruit?
I don't know.
That would be awesome for all job seekers, I think.
See, it's so interesting to say that, because I appreciate it. Thank you. And it's very complimentary. I started before I started recruiting, and I've dealt with other recruiters, they always seem to be, and I'm generalized, this doesn't hold to everybody, but very, very kind of phony-ish. They're putting on an air, putting on a pretense. And it did make sense to me. To me, it always felt, because I know in my own personal relationships or business relationships, I just want the other person, just to be themselves and talk, so we can get to know each other and see if it's a fit. And I apply that in terms of the recruiting. And I also apply that in Forbes when I interview people, whether it's a CEO, a chief people officer, or whoever it may be, I just treat them like, hey, I want to learn. I want to understand what you're doing. And I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen more than I talk, because I want to absorb and understand you. And to me, that's such a simple concept. But for so many people, it's just hard to put in practice.
Can I just weigh in here for a minute? Because teaching recruiters how to recruit is a real thing, and many absolutely need additional training. But just a little tidbit: when I was at AT&T, I, among other people, did hire and people that wanted to be recruiters. We used to rent out a hotel, hire actors from New York who would come and pretend that they were candidates that were a little difficult, and see how everybody handled it. So actually, it was a fun day. But yeah, it is a real thing, and a lot more hiring managers and recruiters need the training.
I agree with you on that, Linda. Absolutely. As a former recruiter, I never got that, training in that respect. So that's awesome for you. I'm really, really happy to spread the word.
This is funny for recruiting. A lot of the training is this. When I first started, it was like, okay, Jack, hey, here's the phone book, or here's the whatever. Just start calling. No exaggeration.
Yes.
There really is just not much training whatsoever. And the only training is you kind of eavesdropping on other people's conversations to figure out, all right, what do they say? What works? What makes me cringe?
What works?
What seems to be successful? And I'm going to emulate that.
A wide open field. Anybody want to start a business?
Yes.
Well, there's also different types of recruiters, Jack. And I think that's one of the things job seekers are different types of recruiters, different levels of it. And, I don't mean to generalize, but not everyone has the same path to get to a company through a hiring manager. And I think a lot of times job seekers don't realize that, or they make assumptions, for sure.
it's confusing because you have people who are, let's say, executive search from like a Spencer Stewart, Korn Ferry that really plays C-suites. And then you go run the gamut to contingency recruiters, which most people are. And with contingency, that means basically you get a job order to work for, but then so does, Claire, and so does Christine and Linda and Ken. So now you're competing against a whole lot of other recruiters, plus the company themselves, plus when they post on LinkedIn and on Indeed. So when you're a contingency, you only get paid if you find that right candidate, place the right candidate, and the candidate stays there for a certain specified amount of time. So it's rough. So when you speak to a recruiter, this is what's going on behind the scenes. They're thinking, hey, if you're good for this job, I'm gonna be a pest, and I'm gonna be on you, and I'm gonna keep nudging you to send the resume and interview because I know I have a good chance of placing you, and if I place you, I'm gonna get paid. Whereas for people who feel the blow off, sometimes it's not that the recruiter is a jerk, and they may be a jerk, but it's because they feel that, hey, if I'm spending all this time with Linda, she's not right for it. And if I don't move and bounce off of her to go to somebody who I can place, I'm losing time and I'm losing out to my competitor. So it's a good question, Ken, because this kind of gives a glimpse into what happens behind the scenes, like why you get that, like, leave me alone, or on the other side, why are you blowing me off? Because it's the financial aspect of it.
Yes.
So I'm welcoming Jeff Young to the conversation today. Looking forward to it.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
If everyone doesn't know Jeff is the go-to person here, the LinkedIn guru. We've probably met or got to know each other maybe a year or so ago, then some. We've been talking basically about recruiting and job search and the like, and I'll ask your opinion. We talked about the idea of the career gap on LinkedIn and what people's thoughts are about that. And I'd be curious to get your sense, because you do very similar to what I do in terms of job seekers and that stuff. So what are your thoughts about having that as a career gap on the profile?
Putting the career gap on. Actually, I did this on a recent one that was for Jewish Vocational Services. That was a question. I did a LinkedIn Ask the Expert, and that question was asked. And I think there are both positives and negatives to it as far as the way it's kind of a personal choice, just about like everything on LinkedIn. I would use it. Here's my take on it in terms of real quickly. I would use it if it enhances your profile. I would not if it's not going to be something where you can actually use it to springboard from what you did during that career break to what you want to do when you grow up in the future, right? So for example, I mean, I have a career break that was 14 months worth of job search, okay? But that was also back in 2021, back in 2001. So it was 20 years ago. So I will never put that career break on my profile because it doesn't do anything to enhance it. The only way I put it on there is if I would use it to tell people something I accomplished during that time that would be an enhancement to what I wanted to do in the future. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, I wanted to first of all say thank you for inviting me, of course, Ken, and congratulations on your 100th. Congratulations on being 100. And I think this is like the third time I've actually been on a live with you that you have asked me to be a guest. So I've been, so I can do the math. I've been on 3% of your lives. That may not sound like a lot, but it's a lot to me.
No, I mean, and have you met Linda Trignano?
Nope. I know Christine. I don't think I've met Jack either, and I've not met Linda before as well. So namaste. Very nice to meet you as well.
Good to meet you, but I've heard your name.
Jack is a recruiter. Go ahead, Linda.
I was just going to say I've heard Jeff's name, and I love your background. So.
Thank you. It sometimes is in the foreground as well. I mean, I actually. Sorry, I always scare people when I start to undress.
So Jack is a recruiter, I've been getting, and we've been asking Jack a lot of things from a recruiter's perspective. as much as anything else, because as job seeker coaches, we can only do so much. And I love Jack and his answers, because he's able to be speaking to certain things. So is there any question that you might have for Jack from a recruiter standpoint?
Well, I guess one of the things that I would ask is it really true, Jack, that 95% of the recruiters in the United States actually use LinkedIn as a primary tool? I don't know whether you use LinkedIn as a primary tool or not, but.
Oh, without a doubt. You know, I don't know the percentages, but for sure, you know, LinkedIn is so paramount towards recruiters, because it's probably the easiest, best way to find people. You know, and I, you know, when I first started recruiting, you didn't have LinkedIn, and then when they started, like, oh my gosh, like my whole like book of business I developed now is for nothing because everything's out there. What am I going to do? It's over. But no, it didn't have. You know, I kept going. So it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, but where else can you have a ready-made database that's 810 million strong? I mean, there's 810 million possibilities. But by the way, do you use the recruiter package itself?
Yeah, I have a premium package, so like I have the emails and some other bells and whistles, because that makes it easy too, where this way you can kind of reach anybody.
Well, there's a couple of different varieties, obviously, of the premium packages. One of which is a recruiter package, which is, I think, to be not to put too fine a point on it, but it's probably one of the most expensive packages. But it's also one with the most capabilities, especially when it comes to you as a recruiter have some special capabilities that even people with business packages that are premium packages, like I have, as an example, that I don't have. Because of the way that you can find people, is because of the way that you can search for people, and unlimited searching is obviously one of the keys to that process as well.
You know, Jeff, in a way, it's a kind of a very simplistic business. I like to say, because I do this, that is really, you have to be like this super genius and have these amazing abilities to do it. But when you really boil it down, it's okay. I'm looking for, let's say in my field, which is more compliance. So I'm looking for this person who does anti-money laundering and sanctions, because it's in the news. So looking for sanctions, anti-money laundering, OFAC, just kind of a term. And they're looking for somebody in, let's say, New York City. So you really could just narrow it down to, hey, who you want, who you're looking for. It's kind of straightforward. And if, let's say you're a contingency recruiter, what we were talking about before, you want to find that person before everyone else does, because they probably gave that assignment out. So it really, it just makes it easy and it's straightforward. But the frustrating thing, it would be great if I only had access to it, no one else, but everyone else has it. So that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Well, and from the job seeker perspective, Kenneth, Ken, one of the things that I'm consistently telling people is their profile is obviously what they've got to make the most optimized as possible in order to get found. And one of the things that I learned, now I can't swear to this, but again, I talk to a lot of other LinkedIn experts in the world, because that's kind of what I do. I converse with a lot of other people who are helping people with LinkedIn and training people on LinkedIn. And I've told them in almost every single instance that from a job seeker perspective, there are like 4 areas of your profile that are absolutely tantamount that you have the right keywords in those areas, okay? And those areas are your profile, your professional headline, okay? Your about section, your experience section, and your skills section. Okay, now that leaves out obviously one of the very important sections as far as I'm concerned, and that's recommendations, okay, as an example. Recommendations are great to have on your profile, but it's not going to help you get found, because recommendation section is not one of the ones that gets searched when you're using a product like Recruiter and goes to search for those specific keywords that Jack would look for, as an example.
So one of the things that we all talk about in all different ways is the pink unicorn, purple frog, whatever, trying to find that perfect position at a company. They're looking for all these different skills that no one actually has. And Jack, you and I have been trying to get hiring managers for the longest time on a call. What is it going to take, if anything, for hiring managers to get past this illusion that this perfect candidate exists and be willing to realize that people can learn things. It doesn't all have to be in a job spec. And I'm curious from a recruiter's perspective, because I know you can't do it in and of it yourself, but I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not optimistic that it's going to change anytime soon, because this is going on 25 years and it hasn't changed. So I can't deceive myself. Although somehow it has to, because you can't have a hot job market. Right now, there's like 11 million jobs that are open. You have the Great Resignation. You have 4 million people quitting on a monthly basis. So it's unsustainable to do the way that they're doing. So companies really are going to have no choice. So somehow, I think senior leadership has to come and say, wait a minute, if we can't hold on to people, and there's a lot of attrition and people quitting, and you know how it is, if somebody leaves, let's say if Christine leaves and Jeff leaves, then all of a sudden the rest of us have to pick up that slack, and we're frustrated and we're angry because it's all dumped on us. We're not getting paid more, so we're going to leave too. So there probably is going to be, if it keeps continuing the way it's going now, there probably has to be this point where leadership kind of really gets involved and say, no, this is not working. We have to find a better way. We have to streamline it. We have to kind of, let's say, how many interviews are going to be conducted, how many people within the company are going to conduct the interviews. We have to have reasons why you're not taking somebody. If it's a gap or if it's some other dopey reason, that's not going to be acceptable. Another big thing separately for this, and this is not really the question you asked, Ken, but separately, I've seen a big trend in upskilling that's going on now, that where a lot of companies are realizing, hey, we can't find the people. So what we're going to do is we're going to go internal. And this is a lot for the interviews I'm doing with people, through forums, is that a lot of these companies are then kind of upskilling, whether they'll send their people to a coding boot camp or get them access to Coursera or LinkedIn kind of learning, because they feel like, hey, if we can't find these people, maybe what we'll do is we'll look internally and see who we have, and let's get them to that next level so they can advance within the career. So then you get people who are going to be loyal, people who are going to be appreciative, and they're going to have gratitude to say, hey, wow, you invested a lot of money in me. That means you have a lot of faith in me and you want me to succeed. And now maybe I kind of learned to be a cybersecurity person. That's fantastic. I'm going to be forever grateful. So on that part is positive. So the first question you asked, Ken, that's kind of, I'm somewhat sanguine about it getting changed, but I think it may change. But the positivity I see is that there's definitely this movement of employee empowerment where companies are really trying to do right by their people in there. This cynical New Yorker in me is like, hey, they're doing it because they have to do it. But put that aside, I'm seeing 4-day work weeks. I'm seeing staggered hours. I'm seeing digital nomads. I'm seeing, like I mentioned before, have different, let's say, apps, whether a Calm app or different, a mental health app, getting mental health days off, shutting like LinkedIn did this, shut down for a whole week so no one feels the pressure to work and just can decompress. So that part, interestingly enough, they're doing a lot for the mental health, emotional well-being and trying to prevent burnout. So that I got to give companies credit for really stepping up in that. That's just, if we had this conversation just a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have thought like everything I said now was ridiculous. Like that is like just, dreaming, but it's here. So that part I'm really excited about.
Well, Joe, Christine, did you want to chime in?
So going with that, Jack, let me ask you, are you seeing the purple unicorn? Are you seeing a change from hiring managers and companies in the demand for degrees, pieces of paper? You talked about upskilling and reskilling and that kind of thing. Do they want certifications? Do they want to know that you did the latest Microsoft Excel program or got a cybersecurity certificate as opposed to a degree in cybersecurity? What do they want?
It's a lot of talk about that, but not so much action on it. So they'll say these things, oh yeah, you don't need a degree, you don't need this, and then you do. And you have to do it. Now, that being said, in certain areas, let's say you're in tech and maybe you went to this boot camp that's pretty acknowledged and you didn't go for a computer science degree, but you have this boot camp and with tech, you could actually, they'll test you on how well you can code. And if you could show, hey, I can really code as well as the person who went to, MIT, well, okay, then they'll give you the shot. So in certain areas, yes, but in a lot of areas, it's still it's still driving with the brake on, where they're not, they'll say it, they'll talk it, but they'll be like, Jack, let's see who else you can come up with. Let's see.
Is that because they're getting a lot of applicants that already have a degree versus the younger, newer people that might not have had the opportunity to get the piece of paper? I'm not really sure.
I think, in my own opinion, I think it boils down to this, is they, want to find somebody who could hit the ground running day one, that if the job description has 10 ingredients on it, that person has 12. So they could come in there, they could do the job. And because when you're hiring, if you're a hiring manager, you're an HR person, you have political capital at stake. You want to make sure that when you hire Ken can come in the job and boom, just he could rock it and he could do well and he could succeed. And then they're worried if you get someone who doesn't have the college degree, doesn't have the exact match, you hire the person, they don't work out. Christine, you and I are hiring managers. We're going to get the heat. Like, what's wrong with you two? Like, you made such a bad choice.
Right.
So then you think the next time I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to protect my butt and I'm going to make sure they have the degree. I'm going to make sure they have the exact things, because otherwise I have to worry about my job.
Yeah.
So it's a really, it puts you, sometimes what ends up happening is the way the corporate culture is designed, it makes you have to do certain things when you don't want to do it. And so sometimes you want to point your finger and blame why you're doing this, but then you realize, all right, they don't want to lose their jobs by hiring someone that's not going to work out. They don't want to lose political capital. So it becomes this kind of really bad scene.
But doesn't the opposite of that end up happening, is that you take so much longer to hire the person? So and we all know, I totally agree with you, Kenneth, that there is no such thing as a purple squirrel. Okay, and I have a friend of mine who's a recruiter who calls herself the Purple Squirrel Magnet, which I thought was interesting. I mean, it's an interesting branding too. I'm the Purple Squirrel Magnet. I can find your purple squirrel, right? But in my career, I've done a great deal of work with I've done a great deal of organizational development work, and which means that I've worked with, but not for, a lot of HR departments. Now, the interesting thing about all of those folks who are in HR or trying to go through this process of hiring somebody, has anybody else on the call here in the panel ever heard of something called a cash box? KASH. Okay. I always thought this was an interesting concept, because I always thought that it would be better if organizations started to use a certain side of the box instead of the other side of the box. So it's KASH, and it goes KASH. Okay. So KS is on this side of the box. Okay. That stands for knowledge and skills. That's what people are almost always going to go look at in terms of the certifications and the degrees and those kind of things, in terms of what they're trying to hire for. They're hiring for knowledge and skills, right? But the other side of the box, the AH, is attitude and habits. And if you've got the right person who's got the right attitudes and habits, okay, you can give them the rest of what they need in terms of training and or hitting the ground running, and provide them with what they need to succeed from the standpoint of knowledge and skills, as long as they have the right attitude and habits. Because if you hire the right people with the right attitude and habits, they're going to be the right candidate. They're going to be the person who can fulfill whatever it is that you need them to fulfill. Does that make sense? I know it's a little different.
It does, but you know what, Chief? I don't see that happen. What I do see, I see that really what happens is people want exactly what they want. However, what I do see the cash system work out is when, and this is a big trend I'm noticing, and for years now, if let's say in the tech space, in the fintech space, where they'll hire very young, very smart college graduates from the best schools, and that's exactly what they're doing, is your model that you described. They're saying, hey, this person who just graduated, or maybe a year out or so, they went to such and such school, they went to Yale, they went to Harvard. You know what? We know that they have the brain power to do this. And we'll, they may have not done the job, but we're going to give that person the job because we're going to bet that they're smart and they have that. In that part, I definitely see that happening. I definitely see that happen a lot. And I find that happening a lot to the detriment of people who are older and have experience but don't have that pedigree, who probably also have those capabilities but don't have that right name on their diploma, so they lose out. So for a lot of people, you don't see it, but for that cohort, of younger people who went to really top, universities, yeah, for sure.
So where does DEI come into play? Are you saying that in your experience, the younger people who tend to value DEI initiatives more than the older people, 10, not all, not everyone, just 10, the older people are more of a purple squirrel, but the younger who didn't necessarily have the opportunities that older, like I'm trying to figure out where people come into play.
Well, so what I see for the younger, like let's say fairly recent college grads out for a while, if you went to the right schools, you may not have to have the exact skills for that job because they're going to just bet because you had these grades, went to this type of university, that we're just going to presume you're smart and you can figure it out. Now, is that going to happen, work all the time? Probably not, but they're going to wager on it. Now, with diversity and inclusion, that's kind of different. That's really where firms say, hey, we have a mission statement. This is what we have to do. So they will kind of do, it'd be a different path than somebody else where they're saying, hey, this person might not have all the attributes and all the skills, but we really want to hire somebody of this particular, who fits into this kind of area that we feel that we need that, that representation. And for them, they'll be open-minded to say, hey, they may not have everything, but this person will fit in, which is great for them. But then to be fair, it's not fair for the person who has the skills. So it depends where you're in. So one group is going to really benefit, and that's great. Another group is going to be disadvantaged by it.
Right. But the diversity and inclusion piece is something that is being driven in most companies. It is now an item on their line that they have got to be attending to. So, whether it's fair or not, take women, for example, raising women into the ranks of management or higher up may not be fair to somebody with the same skills, but because of the initiatives, it is going to reach a balance. To your point about, I also feel like managers are not going to reduce their items down of their wish list. They are not going to be doing that. I am not hopeful that will happen as much as you, Jack, the same as you. But I am hopeful that this whole, we're going to train people internally in the company leads to the fact that, geez, they didn't have the skills, we trained them, they did a great job. And that leads to looking at candidates in a different light. Is that happening today? No. Do I see that happening? I actually do. I think that will transition over. If you're bringing in people from the diversity and inclusion factor, retraining, this will translate into something that I think will benefit all job seekers ultimately in the end. And I also think the churn between millennials and Gen Z and their willingness to leave a company is going to impact companies in this area as well, because companies are going to start to say, geez, we want to hang on to good people. We want to bring good people in. We want to do what we need to give them the skills. So I think it's all going to, in the end, after some period of time, translate into a better benefit for all of us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it will take some time. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to head out, but I hope you guys talk about Gen Z because you mentioned Gen Zs, and I have 2 Gen Z kids. Their mindset is so different. I think they're awesome. So I don't know if you're going to talk about that later, and I can pop on back later if you
I have 2 as well, Jack. So I get you.
Right? They are. I think they're going to be out. I think they're going to be our saviors because they've been through, coming out, they didn't see, 9/11 and all that stuff, but the financial crisis, all the political nonsense that we've been going through for years, with COVID. So you've made these kids battle hardened, man. They're tough, they're strong, and they're opinionated. It's, oh my gosh, I can't wait.
And they're flexible. They've learned to flex because of all those things they've gone through.
They can roll. You got it, Jeff.
Yes. It's, oh my God. So if you talk about it later, I'll yeah, maybe have that conversation. Hopefully I can be back in time because I have a lot of faith in him. And I think that's such a,
Well, I was gonna actually end this at 2:30 if that was okay, and we can definitely have a follow-up conversations later. One thing I did want to, pull out, Virginia said there's an opportunity for more apprenticeships, helping people without degrees or backgrounds. And I definitely agree with that. The caveat I would have is that the apprenticeship should go to those of our age too. I think apprenticeships are not just about millennials. Go ahead, Christine.
I think that apprenticeships are awesome in theory and idea. My concern is that someone that takes an apprentice, we all know as job seekers ourselves, we've been in job search somewhere along the line in our life. And we're teaching and talking to job seekers for the most part on this call. We're going to be unemployed again. We're always networking. We're always building relationships. If you send somebody to apprenticeship and they get approved and they start working, 6 years goes by, then what? They still don't have a piece of paper. They still don't have a degree. And now they're looking for a job. If employers, hiring managers, recruiters don't recognize that apprenticeship model, then they're still out in the cold. And we have to train the change that is needed for those people in charge to recognize that apprenticeships are just as important as upskilling so that they can land again and again and again. Until that point, I don't know right now if apprenticeships are the way to go.
Okay, good point.
From the government. Sorry.
None of us can argue with you.
No, I can't.
Sorry.
No.
I'm like, there's radio silence. I don't know.
Well, I think because that brings up a different discussion. Whose responsibility is it to do all this? Is it really the responsibility of the states and the federal government to do all this work, or is this something that has to come from within? And we've had this discussion before. I mean, I don't think it's the place of government. I don't think government can really do a good job with this. I think it really has to come. I know here in New Jersey, we talk about this a lot. There's an unemployment office for blue collar and not white collar. And there's different needs and expectations, and that you can't do a one size fits all process. And maybe, I don't know if it's the same way in Ohio or not, Jeff, but the idea is that there's different needs for different people.
Yep. Yep. And again, you're not leaving it to that element. I don't think is going to get it done. It's going to have to be the corporations that make this kind of change.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it won't happen.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you guys very much for attending today. Linda, I'm hoping to stay on the mend, feel better.
Thank
Christine,
you.
great to have you here. Jeff, as always, thanks a lot. Namas, thanks a lot, everyone, for attending. Have a great day. And if you miss it now, connect and follow up. Take care.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.